The first thing that I would like to do is to help you to recognize the benefits on both sides of this equation, not only for us as researchers, but also for journalists. Because remember, by collaborating with us as researchers, journalists are gaining a lot. We bring so much credibility. Our background, we credential their work and what they're talking about, their subject matter. We also have a lot of niche knowledge, and because of that, we can help them do a deeper dive into something that they're already hopefully rigorously investigating. We can be even more nuanced and not only contribute something new, but look at what they've already put together, or maybe things that they've heard or assumptions that they have. We can help them to be able to clarify their understanding of some pretty heady topics. And so that's really important in terms of the role that we can play. We can also serve for them as providers of these kind of long-term relationship, quote unquote, scoops. Now, what do I mean by that? Now, if you're following guidance that we provide in Publication Academy, one of the things that you're going to be an expert in by the time that you're done with your certification as an academic publishing specialist is you're going to be an expert in keeping your fingers on the pulse of your field. And because of that, you're going to know that things are happening before anybody else. And in the world of the press, knowing something even 24 hours before everybody else is a big deal. You're giving them literally a quote unquote scoop. You're giving them a story. You're giving them something before anybody else. And so by collaborating with journalists, journalists get something really, really important. What they get is someone who is so knowledgeable about the field that maybe a new journal article has just been published. And the story itself is very important, or it has a real impact. If that's the case, especially if there's something emotion-based about it. So for example, I remember reading an article a few years ago now. It feels like yesterday, but you know how it is. The literature moves so quickly, right? And the name of the article was something along the lines of once a sex offender, always a sex offender, ? And what they found was that after an individual who's committed an act of sexual abuse is re-released to the community, that if that individual remains in the community offense-free for at least, I think it's 10 to 15 years, what happens is that their risk of sexual recidivism drops to basically nothing. And they call this process, when they graph it out, it looks like a curve of reducing rates of reoffense. They call that the redemption curve. This idea of the redemption curve is a concept that is very hot in terms of this idea of has to do with community safety. It has to do with the topic of sex offenders, which is a topic that evokes a lot of emotion in people. So this is something that it was a very, very important topic for me to reach out to my journalistic contacts about the moment that I found out that this paper had been published. And sure enough, it had come out of the preceding month. I used a strategy that I discuss in other modules of Publication Academy, where essentially on the browser Google Chrome, I have over 150 different tabs with 150 different journals, their current issue links. And once every single month, I open that session of all the tabs and I look at every table of contents to see what's out there. That keeps my fingers on the pulse, and it has established for me some really strong long-term relationships with journalists across mediums of media, from radio to executive producers for local and national television outlets to the print press. You name it, I have those contacts, and that's how I built that up over the years, is by building these long-term relationships. Journalists, though, can help us out a lot as researchers. Now, what can they do for us? Well, a lot of things. They bring our work to a much wider audience. And this is not an audience just of researchers, obviously, and it's not even just an audience of other stakeholder groups like policymakers and practitioners. It is also an audience of just the lay public. And the more individuals get to know us, the more they like us. We call that the mere exposure effect. And it's certainly something where that visibility has career implications. So if we're looking for career advancement, if we're looking to obtain tenure, for example, if we're looking to be able to serve as, let's say, a president or a vice president of a given professional association, these are things that require a lot of visibility. And so if you are able to say, like on your CV, you can say, I have publications from these leading, high impact factor journals. That's a great thing. But if you can say my work has been quoted in like here in the US, the Washington Post and the New York Times, really big sources of print news. And if you say I've been on Fox News, I've been on CNN, I've been on these really big television outlets here in the US, also that is a really big deal. And of course, just being quoted one time on any of these networks, you can say for the rest of your life that you were quoted on such and such a show, or maybe someone has said something very kind about you, an executive producer has said, this is an individual, very professional, so on and so forth, on your LinkedIn profile, under your endorsements section. Oh my goodness, this is fantastic. And this can really help your career. And then obviously, this is something where if we are getting out to the right stakeholders, we can do what we as researchers dream of, which is to have a practical impact on professionals who are practitioners out there in the field, but also policymakers. And that's what we want to do. None of us want to do research for the sake of research. We want to actually change the world. This is why we're doing our work. And we have a higher likelihood of being able to accomplish that goal when we collaborate with journalists. And the result of these collaborations, again, it's a win for everyone because it is a more rapid dissemination of evidence-based practices in a way that professionals, but also lay people can appreciate them because they need to be communicated properly. How to do that best, we're going to be discussing later in today's module.